Moves to waive patents on coronavirus vaccines gain support, with the US backing the proposal. Supporters say it will boost global access to the shot. And for a closer look at how patents work, we are joined now by Nick Dearden from Global Justice Now. So tell us, how will lifting these patent rules actually help with global vaccination efforts?
Well, one of the problems we've got at the moment is that the patents, the property of these vaccines is owned by a few multinational corporations, essentially, and they can decide who to license and who not to license. And what that means is many factories around the world can't produce these vaccines. They don't own the patents, and they won't. The big multinational corporations won't license them to produce it. And what that means is we have hundreds of millions of shots of this vaccine that could have been produced that aren't being produced. Factories are lying idle. Meanwhile, rich countries like my own have vaccinated huge proportion of its population, while other countries around the world have virtually no vaccines at all. So we need to ramp up production. The patents are standing in the way. And this is a really exciting moment where the United States has said, no, we just need to override them. Lives are more important in a pandemic than the profits of the corporations that own and control these patents.
An exciting moment, yes, but can you explain to us then, Mr. Dearden, why countries are divided over the plan?
Well, what we've seen so far is, by and large, most countries in the developing world, in the global south, are supporting this plan because they don't have enough vaccines. Most rich countries that actually do have enough vaccines have opposed the plan. And they've opposed the plan, by and large, because they've stood behind their pharmaceutical corporations and the investors invested in those corporations. In other words, what they've said is the profitability of these corporations is more important than ensuring the whole world is vaccinated as quickly as possible. And we think that's absolutely shameful. You know, the countries that essentially have bypassed global distribution mechanisms, bought up all the vaccines on the market, and then said to developing countries, well, sorry, you can't produce them at the moment, but I'm sure in time it will all be fine. Absolutely shameless. And when you look at the scenes that we're witnessing at the moment in India, you realize the human consequences of holding up the vaccination program globally. And so it's so important that President Biden yesterday came out and said, no, we're going to change course on this. We're going to make a different decision, a different policy. And now it's very interesting. Today across Europe, you see France beginning to change its mind, Spain change its mind, Italy change its mind, Belgium change its mind. So increasingly the dominoes are beginning to fall now. And it looks like we could actually reach an agreement here at the World Trade Organization to override these patents.
Now, you've used strong words like shameless, but, you know, these drug manufacturers, they are arguing that patent rules are not the main issue.
Well, I understand that, but we've heard also from factories from India, Bangladesh, even here in the West, in Canada, in Denmark, who've said, we have approached the corporations, we've tried to get the technical know-how and the licenses to produce these vaccines, and the companies won't give them to us. So we believe there are hundreds of millions of doses that could have been produced over the last few months that haven't been produced because of this problem. Now, the corporations may say, well, hang on a minute, we need to ensure very high profits, otherwise we would never invest in these vaccines in the first place. But we also dispute that because actually huge amounts of money that have come for the research and development of these vaccines, and indeed the manufacturing and rollout of these vaccines, have come from the taxpayer, have come from the public purse. They haven't by and large come from the private sector. So what you're seeing here is corporations, of course, they say it's not the right solution because they don't want to dampen down their profits. Pfizer had just earlier this week said this year it expected to bring in $26 billion just from this one vaccine. That would make it the most profitable medicine ever created in a single year in history. So of course they don't want to do it, but we very firmly believe it is both wrong because so much of this money was public in the first place, but also because there can be no question that factories who want to produce, who are capable of producing, cannot produce vaccines at the moment. And that is an obstacle that we simply can't tolerate in the middle of a pandemic when so many hundreds of thousands of lives are being lost.
So you're looking for some substantive action at the World Trade Organization, but will the United States support the plan to help negotiations there?
So it said it will. Biden's trade representative said yesterday that they will now engage in serious substantive negotiations to get something through. We would actually like them to go a bit further. They've said they're interested in overriding patents on vaccines. We think that should also be applied to treatments, therapeutic treatments, which are increasingly being invested in, and also protective equipment, ventilators and that kind of thing that are desperately needed around the world. Corporate property should not stand in the way of any of that. Any of those materials being produced in the numbers that we require at the moment. So yes, we think that's the case. What we're waiting to see now is which governments will continue to stand out against the US and against the global South. And I fear that my government may be one of those governments which will really go to the wall in order to protect corporate profits and patents.
And waiving vaccine patents, is that going to be the cure-all, or you think more can be done to boost our global inoculation efforts?
It's definitely not everything. I mean, it's an important, vital and necessary first step, but there's more that needs to be done, because once the patents have been overridden, once we can license openly, we then need to share the technology. Now, the World Health Organization set up a body right at the beginning of the pandemic called CTAP, the Coronavirus Technology Access Pool. And what it wanted was for all the companies and all the scientific laboratories and institutions that have been working on vaccines and treatments to pool their resources, to pool their knowledge and scientific know-how. It would be like a one-stop shop where factories and countries that want to produce can go and learn how to do that and receive an open license to do it. Unfortunately, to date, all of the big pharmaceutical corporations have boycotted that body. There is no knowledge in there. So it would be good to override their patents, but we then need to compel them to share that technology, to share that know-how. And frankly, governments like mine also need to be producing money to ensure that countries that are unable to can begin to scale up manufacturing production. As I say, there are already many factories that could be producing that aren't out there, but there need to be more. We need to create more production capacity right the way around the world. And I think this isn't going to be just important for coronavirus. Some of the technology behind these vaccines is really revolutionary. We're talking about the possibility of producing a vaccine for HIV. We're talking about the possibility of producing vaccines for certain types of cancer. These things shouldn't be in private hands. They have the ability to absolutely revolutionize global health around the world, and they should be treated, therefore, as a public good.
Oh, thanks very much for your insight. We got a fair bit out of that. Nick Dearden there, Director of Global Justice Now.